Hey you guys, how you doing? This is Richard Sachs. I'm your host on Lost Arts Radio. Thanks for stopping by. It's nice to be with you again. Um, I've, as usual, got notes on about 3 hours worth of stuff to share with you in 1 hour, so we'll see what's going to happen with that. My chipmunk speed talking is not that much in practice, so I'll just hit the high points and at least get as much of this as I can in. And by the way, this is the Lost Arts Radio live show for November 9th, in case you're looking at it in an archive form, 2019, getting near the end of the year. And one thing I was definitely noticing in writing down notes about what I wanted to share with you today is that it's getting really more and more challenging to talk about what's really happening, but stay on the air. The censorship is increasing, and you all know that on the major platforms we've had experience with view counters being disabled and the show shadow ban and things like that. But fortunately, we're primarily still on. And I want to talk about what's happening here in America, where we're broadcasting from, and worldwide as much as possible. So I'll try to be as judicious in choosing words as possible. And if we do disappear off the major platform that you're watching us on, and go from, 0 view counters to just disappearing, remember that you can keep up with where we are still on the air at lostartsradio.com and also at brighteon.com, brighteon.com, and our channel is brighteon.com/channel/lostartsradio. So, and Brighteon is really progressing there. I haven't checked it recently, but supposedly they've gotten to the point where you can subscribe to a channel, which is kind of neat. That's a new feature, and there are others coming up fairly quickly. Anyway, before we use up too much time here, I think the main theme that I've been looking at is in America, where we're watching the national news. It seems like forces of evil are really taking over national and even a lot of local events. I guess you would say that most positions of power in government and major corporations are being affected that way. And on this level, just looking at it from a analytical point of view, it doesn't look very positive for the future. And I think that's why the negative side is so confident. But it's not as negative as it looks, because this is not the only level that things are happening on. And it's just that a lot of the population in our country and a lot of the world is hypnotized and brainwashed and going along with everything and not even noticing much of what's really happening, just believing what they're seeing on mainstream television, radio, newspapers, things like that. Not just obeying, what they're supposed to do and how they're supposed to live, but believing in the authorities, even though they're not telling the truth about almost anything. And it seems like they're getting more blatant with that as time goes on. Certainly in the major national news stories, but I think it's a very complex control system that is running the show right now. And at the top is actual evil running everything. It's not for money, but what does that mean? People talk about evil, and a lot of times they just mean the side of any issue that they don't agree with, and that's not the way that I'm using it. By evil, I mean when people just are in love with destruction and death and suffering and tearing things apart for its own sake, not to make a profit necessarily, but just because they actually are worshiping darkness. It's really different. The lower levels are about money, but at the top, it's just for the sake of pain and fear, darkness. And I agree with some people that I can't name, unfortunately, on this show, if we're going to stay here beyond today or beyond this minute. But I'll use their first names. I think that's fairly safe because there's lots of people with the same first names. And I just wanted to say that I agree with Mike and Alex and Joel and Leo and others, that at the highest level, the human rulers, and this is going to be a bit outside the box. Hopefully it's okay with you guys, but what I've looked into is the human rulers are actually controlled by levels above them, very dark, that are not physical. And in my language, and this is not a religious commentary at all, it has nothing to do with that. To me, they're just people. They just don't have physical bodies, but they're individuals like we are. They're just pretty confused. And in my language, I'd call them lower astral beings. But the labels and the terms and the words really don't matter as much as what they really are doing. And I've noticed lately, that Mike's articles have been getting a lot more intense, and it's because he writes what he really feels. I know Mike, and that's how he looks at things. And he's saying that, and Mike and the others that I mentioned, they're agreeing that the higher influence controlling the global rulers is satanic and demonic, and it's not physical. And I think they're completely right. I have some reasons for believing that are not anything I believe. It's experience. And I'd say that the human rulers themselves at the top levels are mostly satanic. And I don't mean this, as I said, in a religious term at all, but referring specifically not to a belief, but to worship of suffering and death and destruction for their own sake. The ones that are doing it for money are a little bit further down the chain. So how does this reflect in the levels that we can see in world affairs? And I would say one way to look at it is, and remember, I'm not going into all this to end up at a cynical, negative conclusion. I don't feel that way at all. But it seems like if we understand a little bit of strategic awareness of what our situation actually is and what we're dealing with, then it's easier to look at what solutions actually might be compared to if we have no idea what's going on and we're just part of the hypnotized zombie program. So examples of how this is manifesting in the physical level are in the fact partly that environmental solutions, and oh, by the way, before I talk about environmental solutions, I don't just get attacked and disagreed with by the so-called liberal progressive left side. I get disagreed with and severely attacked by some of the so-called conservative right side, because a lot of them actually don't think there's any environmental issues. The way some of them put it is there's no environmental emergency. And in a way, they're right. There's nothing that if you don't do it today, it's going to be hopeless tomorrow. There's not that kind of emergency. I agree with that. But many of them think there's no critical, pressing, environmental, serious situations. And that's not true. I mean, I know I've been looking into the whole environmentalist side since the early 1960s at least, and studying climate in the 60s when we were first worried about CO2 levels in the atmosphere. Now, I don't think CO2 levels in the atmosphere are an issue at all, but I did in the 60s. And at that time, we were thinking that it was going to be an ice age starting right away. And ice ages do happen sometimes. I mean, there's a long history of that in the global fossil record, and digging into the frozen areas of the world, and the glaciers have come way down closer to the equator than they are now. But it's not happening immediately. But at that time, we thought it might be accelerated, partly because of soil mineral changes, using up the powdered rock dust in the soil, and things that, if we have time, we can mention in a little bit more detail. But what I'm saying to the so-called right side conservative people that are attacking me for some of these things that I'm pointing out, I'm not partisan at all, and I'm not left or right, or I don't even believe in those kind of labels. I'm just interested in what's happening or not happening, and making our understanding of all this stuff as clear as possible. And there are serious environmental problems happening right now, every day, with the air, the water, the land, the soil, ocean situations that are full of toxic sewage and stuff like that. It's not what we're being told about the climate change. And this is what some of the so-called right-wing people are grabbing onto. They understand that the climate change emergency that we're being told we're going to die in 7 years, and all, whatever the number of years is today, I'm not sure. That's a fraud. And this whole thing that's being used to Gaia being alive and all that, and because of that, humans have to die and, save the world, kill yourself, that kind of thinking, that's a complete fraud. But what's weird about it is that there is serious environmental damage going on and things that must be reversed, because the so-called environment is the life support system of physical life forms on the planet, which we are one of. It includes human beings. I'm sure you realize that also. But if you don't take care of the so-called environment, all the biosphere around you, humanity doesn't get to live here that much longer. But it's not to say that the whole climate change hysteria and the panic about global warming is real, because I totally don't think it is. But the issue of poisoning all aspects of the biosphere, which undoubtedly has an effect on weather and climate as well, excuse me, that's real. And it's very high profile, high priority issue that has to be dealt with. But what I was going to say when I started this sentence and got diverted is that the environmental solutions, how to bring it all back into harmony, that's completely known. It's been known for a really long time, not just recently. And likewise, health solutions are known. And the reason that's an issue is that health all over the planet, and especially in countries like America, but pretty much everywhere, is really terrible. And, people are suffering and dying all over the place that don't need to, at the hands of what they call medicine and science and academia that's teaching certain things about health that are completely crazy and wrong. But they just think that certain sources, and I know because I'm in the middle of the academic world right now too, is that sources like CDC, WHO, these recognized government agencies, HHS, and these different authoritative organizations, those are unquestionable. They're considered unquestionably accurate references. If you show what they say and put it in a journal, one of the official recognized journals, that's considered unquestionable truth, settled science, etc. Not nonsense like that. And the journals themselves, I've talked to a number of journal owners off the record, and I said, if we had some great cure for cancer that was natural and had no negative effects, what they call side effects to make you think that they're not important, there's really no such thing as side effects. They're just effects. And I was asking these journal owners if we had a solution to any of these terminal diseases that didn't require drugs or invasive procedures or anything like that, and had no effects that, the usual side effects like, well, it'll give you heart attacks and dementia, your hair will fall out, your eyes will stop working, you won't be able to walk anymore, little things like that are common. Oh, and one of the common side effects, which is death. And if we had a therapy that didn't involve that was natural and cheap, which we do actually, would you put it in the journals? And every single one of them said, absolutely not. Not only would our sponsors be very upset because they depend on the income from people taking the conventional route, so-called conventional, it's really totally insane, but maliciously insane, but they call it conventional. And they said, no, we wouldn't print that in the journals. You think we're idiots? We're not going to do that. And besides, the sponsors being upset, this was kind of an obscure side discussion, but they understand that those sponsors, like, the drug companies and the ones that sell these injections that you are supposed to inject into babies and everything, they are not just intellectual organizations. They have hit teams, and they get very involved physically with people who step out of line, especially if they have good credentials. But the reason I got into that whole sidetrack is that the health solutions are known. They're known right now. I mean, we could eliminate probably 98% of the healthcare system and be in better shape than right now. And the reason I don't say 100% is that there are some great medical personnel and doctors that are putting people back together after they get run over by a car or jump out of a window somewhere and land on a wrought iron fence and get spikes through their chest. And that's really emotionally demanding work to fix that kind of stuff. And there are these great doctors and surgeons and medical backup teams and things that are doing unbelievably heroic, wonderful work. They could use a little less of the toxic drugs in the process, but overall they're doing wonderful work. But the health system that deals with health and disease, which you would think would be a major function of the health system, right? They're seriously confused. And it's not entirely their fault. It's that they're educated. And who supports the education? The drug dealers, right? I mean, the pharmaceutical advanced scientists. So, and the same thing happens in the energy sector, where solar and wind are nothing. I mean, they're probably better than a lot of things, but the real alternative, clean and free energy sources that are magnetic and relate to 0-point energy and all that, running vehicles on water, the usual stuff that's already been demonstrated and proven. And unfortunately, the main guy that proved the water vehicle thing was killed by, agents that didn't appreciate what he was demonstrating. Those solutions are also known. In fact, one of those great emergency physicians that I was saying were such incredible people, Dr. Stephen Greer, has done a lot of great work, and one of them is trying to make a platform for bringing out these truly advanced energy solutions without the inventors or the reverse engineer people getting assassinated. He hasn't done it yet, but he's got that set up, and hopefully it'll work. Those solutions have been known, according to Dr. Greer, for more than 100 years. And we're flying around on airplanes that burn jet fuel and cars that burn up gasoline and diesel, and that's not necessary. It's just that if you try to demonstrate exactly how it's not necessary, you have this problem that you just immediately commit suicide or something along that line. And that needs to be worked out. I don't think they're talking about that in engineering classes in universities right now. The same thing with agriculture. The chemical fertilizers that are credited to Justus von Liebig, a German scientist, those have never been necessary. And advanced organic methods beyond what USDA has right now have been available indefinitely. I mean, they're suppressed like the rest of it. And they need to find a way to get out. Same thing with economic solutions. It's all these programs that the presidential candidates in America are proposing. It makes you wonder why they forgot to mention the major element in all financial distress in the country, which is the Federal Reserve. And read Ed Griffin's book, The Creature from Jekyll Island, if you're not familiar with how the system works. It's not there to protect you, and like they sold it in 1913 when Congress, voted for this stuff under Woodrow Wilson when he was president. Congress was told, well, this will make it non-political, and they thought, wow, non-political, that sounds great. And they had no idea what non-political meant. They said, we will take care of it so The economy will not be knocked around by the changes in political rulership and stuff. We'll make it a separate agency that will not be subject to that. What they meant was, we'll rule the country and you guys won't. And you'll do what we say because nobody can do anything. Now, what they don't tell you is that, yeah, they could do something. Congress could abolish it, as Ron Paul and others who have been brave enough to talk about it have mentioned. But they're all terrified to do that because that central bank has the power to totally destroy the economy, not gradually like they're doing now, but all at once. And they will threaten to do that openly, and nobody in Congress will pretty much stand up to that. Maybe Rand Paul, I don't know, but for the most part, nobody will resist it. Anyway, solutions to the economic situation, which is basically true free market capitalism that has never been fully tried in the US or any other major country that I know of. We don't have that now in America. We definitely don't have that. We've got collusion between government agencies and the industries that they're supposed to control, like between CDC and the drug companies and everything. It's a mess, and it's nowhere near a free market. So as the central bank siphons the money out of the economy and prints money for nothing, which has debt with it, and they don't print the money. Well, when I say print, I mean computer entries now. It's mostly computer entries, not printed. And most of the value has gone out of the coins too, which used to be silver, and the penny's copper, I guess. With all that going on, it's impossible to pay the debt back to the so-called Federal Reserve, which is not federal at all. And you've got a condition of slavery and government control of the government by the central bank, and that's happening in pretty much every major country. That's why Libya had to be destroyed, for example, because it didn't have a BIS-connected central bank, and they set one up there even before they destroyed the country when it was invaded under Obama. So solutions to all this stuff are completely known. It's not that there's more research needed. More research is always great, but that's not the reason these solutions are not common knowledge. It's that they're hidden and violently suppressed by government and its partner major corporations, banks, media, big tech, government agencies, and supragovernmental organizations. That means international, like the UN, the WHO, CFR, and a lot of others. They're all cooperating, you might say, to put it politely. And so when Kennedy was killed and we were told that anybody who believed there was more than one shooter with Kennedy was a conspiracy theorist, and then they found, wow, that's a great term to demonize and make people look like idiots who believe in anything we don't authorize. And that's being done now. And the reason that is being used as a term to ridicule you is because the reality is so much beyond what you can imagine for just a normal old conspiracy. It's near total collusion between all the government agencies and the so-called private industries that are almost merged together with them at this point. And on a lot of levels, it's international, even among nations that don't seem to be cooperating on the surface. And you can tell that by the coordination of programs like geoengineering that are way beyond any one country to run them. And all the leaders of the country seem to forget to look, you tilt your head about 30 degrees and you can see the chemtrails all over the place. And that's one of those crazy theories too. And none of them will talk about it, indicating deep levels of control. So what would you say is the motivation for suppressing the real information? And if you start at the bottom of the whole system, down where the regular people, all of us are, most of us are suffering from program conditioning, and we've been taught in our wonderful education system and by the media and all the commercials and the entertainment and the programmed sitcoms and everything else, that we've been programmed since kids, even back when I was a kid, to trust authority figures without question. And institutions, they're there to help you and keep you safe, especially. And includes all of the authorities at the local, state, federal, and international levels, the government agencies and the corporations and the news outlets, the media. They're all there to help you and to get rid of the fake information and make sure they only tell you what's true. And now to make sure that anybody giving false information, which is anything that disagrees with the propaganda, has to be removed from public view too. And the same thing, medical and under other industry organizations are involved in the whole thing. So the whole worldview that we've been trained in is based on that experience, trusting authorities, and also the idea of who they tell us we are. And underneath our trust of these government and corporate authorities is fear. That's a real motivation, and it's fear of the unknown and this like terrifying chaos that would happen without these protectors that we have. And this fear is a really powerful tool. It's been used by governments, religions, private gangs, corporations, private gangs like the drug cartels that control Mexico, and very successful strategy. And it's been used really for thousands of years in various forms. And religions say it most openly. Historically, many religions have said, look, basically you obey what we tell you God says, or you're going to go to hell. And we'll give you a hard time before that too. Maybe kill you so that you can go sooner. And they've gotten their followers to commit sometimes mass murder and all kinds of major crimes based on the fear. And also the promise of rewards, like going to paradise or heaven if you follow orders, even if you have to kill a bunch of people. Religions have been responsible for a lot of death and destruction. I'm not saying all religions are bad, but you know them by their fruits, right? Which means if they make you murder people for God, it might not be a really good idea. And if they tell you to be kind to everybody, including yourself, and get connected back to the source you came from, it's a whole different issue. And it might be something that's actually good for you. But the fear has been used for thousands of years in governments and agencies and media and corporations and banks and schools are doing this every day. So now the mass fear is being augmented by all kinds of drugs, because when you get your brain destabilized, which happens from drugs, because what people don't understand a lot is your brain is actually part of your body. I know that's a really radical idea, but it actually is. And all kinds of drugs, and that includes now wireless radiation, which has been known to be harmful for a long time. And if you want to get details of that, go back and watch archives of Lost Arts radio shows while they're still up. I look for Mark Steele or Barry Trower or a number of other people we've had talking about the harm of wireless, and it's been intentionally weaponized since before World War II. And Barry was saying that in World War II, in his job, he was debriefing Soviet spies with the information that they had. And they had the technology, not just the Soviets, but the Allies as well, to use directed wireless frequencies to make people into assassins or make them kill themselves or make them go crazy or anything they needed. All kinds of wireless are right in line with that, with the harm of the drugs. And the one that's coming, the 5G, is going to be a lot worse. And it's intended to make it impossible for anybody to stay healthy with a clear mind or anything like that. That's the point of it. And with these massive power supplies at the base of the small cell installations, then people like Mark Steele have explained that these are potentially deadly weapons that can not just make you go crazy and destroy your health, but kill you on the spot. And I think he's right. Um, we know about the real whistleblower that we talked about before from Seattle, who worked for the so-called private security company there. And the idea that, yeah, in World War II era, they had these frequency weapons that would make one person into a murderer or commit suicide. Now their interest is in control of mass numbers of people from one radiation source. And 5G is connected to that. Internet of Things is connected to that. It's a deep issue that we could talk for weeks about. But for us, we're supposed to psychologically stay based in fear and obedience, fear of everything from dogs biting you to God sending you to hell to everything in between, and fear, obedience based on fear. And that's how the surveillance fits in, because it's important to monitor us and make sure that we don't start wandering outside our prescribed boundaries, you might say, of thought and behavior or speech. And censorship is important for that, and going by the Chinese model, but it's actually not a model that originated in China. It was given to China first because their government was very amenable to it. And it's also important for them to get us completely dependent on smartphones, so-called smart. The name smart is really a joke, but you know what I'm talking about. And computers and screens, and to live as much as possible dependent on virtual reality. And a lot of that has been accomplished. And what about the people running these systems, working for all these corporations like big tech and the higher levels of banking, and the people that are enforcing all of this damaging technology? It could be used the other way, but it's being used for damage. And mostly those people that are working for all those corporations, which is huge numbers in many millions, maybe more than that. They're just like us. They're just people that are programmed by fear, and they're educated, in quotes, that's what they call it these days, indoctrinated into false understanding of everything, of themselves, of who we are in the world. And they believe controlling us and suppressing false information is keeping us safe and saving the world. And most of them believe they're really doing a good service for humanity. And for example, there's so many examples, but one of the foods targeted for elimination in America is raw milk. It's like the most demonized food that we've got, certainly the most demonized natural food. And the reason is, if you study it, veganism notwithstanding, because I used to be a vegan and then I was a raw food vegan, and then I found out about what raw milk did and the benefits of cholesterol and things like that. We're not supposed to ever find out about that. It's a superfood, so obviously they wanted it destroyed, or at least made unavailable. And in almost every state, they're working on that now. Some of them, they're merciful enough to let you buy it, but in some states, they say you can't even feed it to your pets, and if you do, you're going to pay for that and be punished. So most of the people working in that system, for the so-called health departments, they think they're saving people from plagues and from all these horrible, evil germs, and they don't have any concept of the misunderstanding of the germ theory and how it really is true, and how it's been twisted. But they're thinking if they do a good job, they're promoted and rewarded with money and positions and titles and power, and it's because they're helping to save the world, and they believe that. And there are punishments for disobedience, and they get harsher the higher up the ladder you go, and the more credentials that you have. Not punishments for doing something bad, punishments for refusing to do something bad. And real crimes that they have to do are often required and then used for control and blackmail, and they're fit smoothly into the system. So the punishment they get is for disobedience, not for doing bad things. The system is just completely upside down. And the thing about getting punished more if you have credentials is really true. In America, in the last few years, more than 100 doctors have been killed for daring to expose a tiny fraction of real health information, and it's because they're believable, and everybody believes, wow, your first name is doctor, you must really know something. And especially if you take the time to put a white coat on and maybe have a stethoscope around your neck or anything, then anything you say is absolute truth. So you can't afford to have people wearing those costumes and those titles saying things that are actually true, and they have severe repercussions for that. The same with inventors who try to distribute free and clean energy devices, which that technology has been, like I said, referring to Dr. Greer's work, that technology has been available for more than 100 years, and they tend to disappear too. Or the same with environmental solutions, cleaning up the oceans and things like that. Those are known. Even on small scale, remember when they had the little incident where they were destroying the Gulf of Mexico with because they drilled into this pressurized oil place that just, obviously they knew where they were going to hit it and release it. And it came out and just started flooding the lower levels of the Gulf of Mexico with oil and toxic chemicals. So the solution was to spray more toxic chemicals, one best known called Corexit, not only on the ocean to hide the oil, not to get rid of it, but to make it sink so that you wouldn't see it and be so embarrassing. But they sprayed it right on the people on shore too, just for good measure, for a little bit of extra effect. Real environmental solutions, like during that period, one of the people that showed up with a true solution was, if I remember right, Kevin Costner. And he had bacteria, a company that he was working with, that would eat up the oil and actually make it harmless and turn it into other compounds. And he was told to go away immediately, which he did. And I think the controllers at this point, they're calling these shots, have great hopes that the total censorship of unacceptable ideas could really make things a lot more peaceful for them. And if they can just actually make it illegal to talk about or question any of the information that's being given out by authorities, if they can make it illegal to give out real health information, energy information, economic or political information, environmental information, they have great hopes for that, and also for what they call a cashless society. And they're telling everybody, oh, that's going to be so convenient. And if it's you won't be able to have money stolen because you won't have any. You'll just have credits. And kind of like the social credits they're rolling out in various places like China and now the US. But this is actually money credits. And if they make it cashless, it completes the cycle from gold and silver, which was supposed to be the original money, so that there could never be a decrease in value. And of course, no central banks were involved at all. And then paper money backed by gold and silver, and then paper money backed by nothing, and then getting rid of large denominations, going to credit cards, and then external chips in the cards, and then internal chips, and eventually brain implants, like Elon Musk's company is announced recently and said they'd have next year for people in malls. It's going to be really easy. You'll see a kiosk in a mall, walk by, the kids will all say, "Mommy, I want a brain chip. It's going to be really great. All the other kids are getting it." And the mother will say, "Well, I guess it's approved by the government. It's probably okay." And they have this vision of everybody getting the brain chips, because if you don't, you won't be able to think fast enough and you will be left behind. So there'll be this great pressure for everybody to get them. And Elon Musk said, don't worry, because it won't take over your entire brain, at least for a while, for quite a while. So it's really fine. And that's where they're trying to go with it. And if the more they get that automated cashless system in, then any disobedience or unacceptable ideas, they just turn your chip off. As Aaron Rousseau said in his talk with a host I can't mention, but you probably know who it is. And, that's total control, at least that's who they say. So who's running all that stuff, this elaborate show? And many of the elected leaders and corporate and agency heads aren't really bosses. I mean, they play that role, but they're actually just following the orders of unseen rulers above them. Most are controlled by blackmail if they step out of line, and heavily rewarded with money and other things if they obey. And the massive child trafficking all over the world is being used primarily to feed the blackmail machine and for some other satanic purposes. But crimes in earlier life, if they look those up on somebody, they can use those for control too. But the real rulers above the visible rulers are not in it for money at all. They already control all the money. They control the money system. They're the authors of the central banking system, as some of the higher banking people have told us, and Ronald Bernard, who I hope will eventually be on the show, that they're totally satanic and worship of pain and death and dark ceremonies of various kinds that he decided not to get into and almost died as a result of refusing to go further. And those in turn are controlled by non-physical beings. And I'm not telling you to agree with anything I'm saying or just to believe it, because that's just a blind religious type of faith. I'm just saying consider what I'm telling you, because it's from more than half a century of digging into all this kind of stuff. And you might like to do your own homework and check it out. But Mike and others, whose last name I can't say, as you know, are saying it's to destroy humanity and population reduction, what they call it. And I agree with Mike for the most part, but I don't think it's just reduction. I think it's total, including themselves, because they figure the real rulers, they won't need their physical bodies. They're doing what they call a sacrifice. This really sick doctrine of sacrifice that says if you kill something innocent, an animal or a person or some great person or whatever, then if you do it the way God wants you to, you're going to get all this massive benefit. And they believe in that. And they believe they won't need their physical bodies when they merge into cyberspace and become immortal and live with this dark power forever. It's going to be really great. And it's not going to happen that way, but they're making a big mess believing it. So right now, in America and worldwide, the agenda is really accelerating, and you can see that in 5G and Internet of Things and geoengineering, GMOs, abortion, disarming of the populations, and making self-defense illegal, actually illegal, even in your own house. Like in the UK, there was more than one, but one famous case I remember of an older man being arrested in his house for trying to defend himself against a home intruder who broke in and was going to steal everything and kill him. And he tried to defend himself with some kind of kitchen knife or something. And I think they put him in prison for that. It's a very strange way of thinking. It's to, indoctrinate the people to be totally helpless on all levels. You can see it too in the poison and processed food supply, and the fluoride and chlorine in the drinking water, and censorship of the media that doesn't tell the truth about almost anything. In the U.S. right now, we're getting a demonstration of the legal system being completely corrupted. This, what they call this impeachment of the current president, all based on lies that are publicly known to be lies, and they don't care. They're just going ahead with it anyway. They read fake transcripts of what the person's being accused of, and constantly slandering and mischaracterizing the president. And he's got all kinds of traitors around him. They want to get rid of him, not because he's any perfect president or anything, obviously, but because he is willing to fight the status quo and question authority and work for sovereignty of the country against the globalist agenda, things that are unacceptable. Shutting down TPP, not being willing to get into the fraudulent Paris Climate Accord, which is a horrible idea. And I say that as a devoted environmentalist. That thing is a complete fraud. And we have a president for the moment in America who knows that and got out of it, or is getting out of it officially now. And for that, he has to be gone, if not, gone from the planet. So same treatment for his associates and friends. And there's a trial I can't say the name of the guy. His first name is Roger, but gag orders on what's going on in there. Only one side can talk. Accused of things that he didn't do, and on and on. It's like some kind of Kafka type book playing out right now in America, with the public being trained that, oh, this is a bad person. It reminds me of the movie Running Man with Arnold Schwarzenegger, when they showed the television. And this is kind of funny considering what Arnold Schwarzenegger later showed himself to actually be. But in the movie Running Man, it was saying that, oh yeah, that Ben Richards, this terrible criminal, is out there just murdering everybody and we have to catch him. And none of it was true. And they had fake footage, very much like the technology that the government agencies have now, where they can show you, and I know this from almost direct experience, they can show you committing and confessing to any crime they want on sound before, but now I think on video too. So they're pretty confident, and there's reasons for it. But it doesn't really look that great for the future of the humanity in the world right now. Much of the public supports and defends all this stuff, and you wonder why. It's just because, and I'm talking fast because we're going to run out of time here. I'm sorry. Otherwise, I'd be explaining this very relaxed, but I have 3 times as much as I should have put down for sharing today. But the basic idea is that education, media, agency information from government agencies, entertainment, which is programmed in general, fear program, makes people very reluctant to go against the status quo. And it's probably being augmented now by the application of microwave weapons, which they hope will include 5G very shortly. I read a newspaper article. I don't read newspapers a lot, but sometimes see what they're talking about. And in our town, we have a newspaper that said, questioning 5G, check your sources. And they said, this is a crazy theory that 5G is bad for you. It's actually totally proven safe. This is all nonsense conspiracy theories. And they said it's part of the same spectrum as visible light, which is completely crazy. But, most people aren't going to question that. And that it's been shown to be totally safe. So just relax and everything's going to be fine. Basically, that's what the newspaper says. And I know Mike, who's been writing these intense articles lately, says that there's evidence of widespread possession and, on a spiritual level. And I didn't always know about this. I thought it was just a religious theory that, I didn't see any reason that it should be true. But about 10 years ago, I had a direct experience with somebody who was under this particular influence and getting rid of it. And that was an intense experience. It is not something that I would ever want to be around, but it just happened. And I learned about it firsthand, and it educated me on the whole subject. And now I can recognize the same sort of behavior in mass numbers of people in the public. And there are means of exorcism that are real, that are much more effective than what the church has taught, and without some of the side effects, but, of relocating the possessing entity into the wrong place. But there's a problem when you have mass numbers possessed, as Mike talks about in his articles. One by one exorcisms is not going to make it. So if you look at what makes people more susceptible to that kind of influence, because obviously it's not affecting everybody directly, all kinds of mind-affecting drugs lower the body's natural defenses against things on a very subtle level, not just physical toxins. All these mind-affecting drugs interface with and damage the natural defense systems that are built into your body. The other thing is that this may sound unreasonable, I know, I'm sorry about it, but I'm just quickly sharing as much as I can from a lot of deep experience with you guys. And if you have evil intent toward anybody, and I mean any others, that lines you up with a frequency that opens you up for influences that you don't want. And of course, the weaponized frequencies that we talked about, dimensional destabilizing techniques like CERN, which had historical precedence in the long past, but that one recently. And then if you look at what helps protect you from all that kind of stuff, number one, avoiding drugs of all kinds. And I'm not telling you medically what to do. I'm not even a medical doctor, so I obviously can't do that. Avoiding toxic food and water. And the water supplies in major cities are all intentionally poisoned. And filtering that at the very least is really important. Sunlight, which they tell us is totally dangerous and there's no safe amount that you can get. Grounding, exercise, sleep. In other words, real physical health, and replacing hatred and condemnation of so-called bad people with healing wishes for everybody. That comes right back. What you wish for everybody else, whether you think they're bad or good, is beside the point. That immediately affects your energy field and determines whether you're susceptible or not to these negative influences. I got to skip some of this stuff. People ask all the time, why shouldn't we hate the bad guys? In fact, the person that I recommend is a great news source and is doing a good job, is still in the awareness of wanting to destroy the bad guys. And why is that not good? Well, it's because the frequency, every one of these emotions has a frequency that's real. It can be measured with sophisticated technology. And the frequency that comes with hate acts on the person who has it, who harbors it. So it basically destroys you as much as bad food or anything. And the bad guys, all the way up to the non-human levels, are, and this is going to sound completely unbelievable, but they're actually victims as well. And we're really fortunate not to be in their place, actually. They're terrified to look at their real situation, and it keeps them committed to being vicious all the time. So some of them will kill you rather than give up what they're doing. So sitting down with them at a meeting to explain with them why they're not doing a very smart thing is probably not a great idea. The question is then, is it possible to turn around this whole ridiculous situation at this point? Because it's gone pretty far and the bad guys think that they're near conclusion for the whole thing. I hope so. I want us to find out. But what you have to do, regardless of what the outcome is going to be, to help yourself and also to help other people, is the same. And look at how things really work. Educate yourself, starting with physical and mental health, and transform your body and your life, because I can tell you for sure that is absolutely possible. What they tell us about health is not true for the most part. What they tell us about aging is not true. And the physical body is a good place to start, because you can see it and work with it and make decisions about what you do during the day, and refocus all the energy from trying to convince other people to change, which is not very rewarding and usually does not work very well at all. People spend their lifetimes trying to convince other people to be different. But there's a better way, and it's actually working on yourself. I've been really doing work and as an independent scientist on that since 1965, originally motivated by the fact that my health was totally destroyed, and started working in my father's medical lab and learned the basics of investigation, and then started using that myself, and a lot of trial and error over decades. With the emphasis on error, I've done more stupid things that I can imagine in my life and in that research, but eventually started to learn about the connection of physical health to agriculture, food, energy, water, environment, all this stuff, including climate, of course, but it's just not exactly like what they tell you. It's negatively affected by what they call healthcare now for the most part, except emergency medicine and a few necessary surgeries. And it's connected to energy technologies and even economics, and it's all one big picture. So I had to get deep into changing consciousness in order to really understand how all this stuff fits together. And I found out that what people call God or spirit or whatever name you want to use for it is actually real. It's not just a belief. And learning as much as you can about where you came from, your current connection to it, how you can get back in harmony with that, and how you're directly connected to everybody else on the planet, everybody else everywhere, is essential to your real education. It's not a division between spiritual and material or anything else, and what you call it doesn't matter, but it's all one picture. I don't know if I can talk fast enough to get to the end of this here. Anyway, even, I've only had like 1/2 century of looking into this stuff, 54 years, and I'm an absolute beginner compared to what there is to know. Like, I don't know any of it, but I'm just, because of that, just sharing some experience with you, and then you can take it further. And the main bottom line here is that working on yourself is the PowerPoint to helping anybody else. It doesn't mean that you don't work on causes, you don't talk to people, you don't work on everything that you're doing now, take care of your responsibilities in your life every day, but it means that behind all that, you're working to transform yourself. And so the power that is in what you do changes, and you'll be able to affect people even if you don't talk to them because of who you become. And that, as far as what I've seen so far, that's the hidden key to helping to turn things around in the world. Is you want to help the world and help other people heal yourself, physical, mental, emotional, consciousness level. If your mind says it's too hard, too discouraging, you're too attached to your habits as they are now, that's all programming, and it's not true. They're just programs. They're not you. And most of these limits are imaginary beliefs. And the rulers want to make sure we stay in them, stay caught in them, but it's better to break out. If you understand that they want you unconscious at all costs, and that's behind all their programs, then you know what to do, right? The opposite. It's like government guidance. And it seems like this hierarchy of darkness is overwhelming compared to the light that you have, that's in you, that is you. The darkness is nothing. Shows us how unconscious of ourselves we are, that we're impressed by the negative side. So be brave and start now. I'm trying to finish in 1 minute here. Do it on your own, or we have this support group we set up called Planetary Healing Club. You're welcome in there if you want to get some support in doing the work to transform your own life. Access point is at planetaryhealingclub.com, or if you have questions about it, just write to me. And I do occasionally some private one-on-one sessions sharing what I've got with your personal situation and maybe giving you a quicker boost if you want it. But you have everything you need to do it yourself. And you're a lot more powerful than you think. And that's not a belief. It's actually real. So that's what I just wanted to leave you some encouragement that this is not hopeless at all. And neither is anybody's personal situation. It's all in what you become aware of. So if you want to do the work, if you get motivated enough, it starts changing, whatever it is. We're out of time. Sunday show with Joel Skousen. We continue our incredible historic series on history of the deep state. You're invited to that. Next episode is showing tomorrow night, Sunday. We have a Subscribe Star channel, subscribestar.com/Lost Arts Radio if you want to help us financially. No commercials. We're not pushing products or anything other than just to tell you they're good. It's not to make money. I mean, I take the money, but the main thing I want to do is be able to just tell you openly and what products and things seem good and not good and share it with you. But if you want to help us stay broadcasting and stay on the air and continue our work, move towards building a school, which is a really expensive, big project that I would really like us to do, then go to subscribestar.com or subscribestar.com/Lost Arts Radio and check out the different levels, or go to our nonprofit page where the money goes to do the projects, and that's lostartsresearchinstitute.org. If you change your intent, I guess this is kind of a bottom line, change your intent, what you're looking at, what you're paying attention to, what you intend to do, and mainly what you intend to become, and you stay with that and open to learning, then the help that you need, that you're capable of receiving, is going to show up. And it's not just some belief to make you feel good. It's actually operating right now. That's about it. And I just want to leave you with encouragement. The limitations that you think you have are because you believe they're there. And your mind says, oh, this is really hard or impractical, or I'm too busy, or these are all things you do while you're doing everything else. It's internal, and it's very powerful. And it's the main thing that the rulers hope that you'll never figure out. So I thought, well, that means that you should do it. That's the bottom line there. So Planetary Healing Club meeting in 30 minutes. Access point at planetaryhealingclub.com. And any questions or comments or subjects that you'd like us to talk about or anything like that, just email me, richard@lostartsradio.com. That's about it. And thank you for the valuable time that you shared with us. I appreciate it. The show is yours. I just feel fortunate you let me be in it with you. And hope that your week goes great, and look forward to seeing you next time. Have a good night.